Yeah, something like that. Well, welcome everyone. Wonderful to have you back after lunch, dinner, tea, lots of breaks. Good. So who do we have here? Let me look at all of you lot. Ah, you're very attentive. This is excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI. Before I talk about AI, you should be aware that I'm a total fraud. So most of this work was done by Rash, who is a hero. So thank you, Rash. I don't know where he is, but woohoo! Rash. Excellent. So there you go. I'll remind you of that again at the end. So, so there are really two ways that we can integrate AI. And I'll talk, so one of them is this thing that sits on the side. Well, maybe there are three ways of doing it. So one is this thing that sits on the side and you chat to. And we're very used to that from the sort of chat GPT world, aren't we? Of, a website you go to and it tells you things. Now, obviously, you can do a lot more than that because they're integrated with a document, which is great. But then there's also sort of putting AI all over the place in the application everywhere, which is where it would be most useful, which is probably not in a separate place in a sidebar. So there's some of that going on as well. But then there's a wholly different way of doing it, which is this MCP endpoint. What is an MCP endpoint, you're going to ask me? And so this is a way for an AI to do fun things with documents without anyone seeing what it's up to, So you can provide APIs that the AI will then be able to extract text out of documents, convert them, and we'll see some of that happening and talk about that with security there. So this is really inside the editing session, and this is remote controlled. So, here's a picture that shows that. Look at that. Aha. So we have a browser, and then, Collabora Online, and you can see it, all the editing going on, or we can shove it in. And we use a very similar API in between. There's a very simple API for doing chat that we reuse for that. So here's some pictures. This is what it looks like. I should point out, this is coming in 2604, I think, mostly. Woohoo, which is really soon now. I think we have a beta out. Do we have a beta out? I need Andrash to confer on this. But either way, it's really getting there. So very soon this will be there. And we have a whole series of fun things to do here that people often want to do. So for example, I rambled a lot and no one's going to understand it. Can we shrink it into something short? I like this button. A lot of content that I read these days seems to have had the opposite of this button. I've written a very small amount of text, please turn it into a long rambling thing, and that makes my life really horrible. But there you are, make the tone more professional, or boring, as it's known. Or rewrite it in a more casual, friendly way, fantastic. So there are a whole number of these pre-canned prompts, and if you want more, there's more. So these will be translated into your language, obviously under the hood. They're English prompts, but they will reply in your language, obviously adapting your text. And that's pretty cool. So that's one thing that's important. There's some other things here like, finding formula errors. And we have some things here that look for statistical problems in your data. Like, is the distribution of digits what we'd expect in real-world data? Or is it fraudulent? That's pretty cool, isn't it, right? And there are various laws that you can say, this looks a little bit dodgy. Anyhow, so there's some good things like that. What else? Create a slide, do all sorts of fun things there. Now, there's also these bits at the bottom. So there's the EU AI Act goodness here. So it says, content generated by an external AI service, tells you what it is, please review before use. Good advice, huh? A human should check it. But better than that, we have this traffic light system. We have a red, orange, green type traffic light. And we want to try and clue the user into the fact that some AI usage is much safer than others. So, this is for the local, on my system, not sharing my data with the world. And this is for the, it's a disaster, we're posting it to America and who knows where it goes, right? And somewhere in between is the orange one. I forget how this works. But this is probably quite good, and possibly we should make this much more visible. I don't know, at least the option to make it more visible. Because sometimes you have a very low-grade thing. You're writing a poetry, you're writing a poem to your spouse about your deep love and appreciation of them. And actually, the Americans are very welcome to know that, and or the Russians, whatever. Like you're not, no shame there. And other times you might be writing about some deeply secret weapons system, and then you really don't want to do this. So how does this work? Well, hopefully you heard Kendi's Candice? Miklos's talk about Markdown earlier, which was awesome. The great joy of Markdown is that it's really hard to screw it up. So, if you're an AI, you don't need to worry about closing a tag at the end of something, which you're liable to forget to do quite often, right? So you just put a little code at the beginning of the line, and the end of the line can look after itself, right? So this is very nice for all sorts of things. Just have these very simple control codes in the text. And so that's why I would argue AIs do this, because, it's hard to get it quite as wrong as you can if you have lots of structure and nesting and interrelation. So we have some nice filters this for writer, impress, and calc that are new. And this is all there. Of course, it's relatively limited, but the good news is it matches styles. So we can match the document styles. And actually, it's quite interesting. If you look at what Microsoft have done with copy and paste, there was a huge amount of work done to make sure that when you copy something from one document and you paste it into another, it brings all of the styles of the original document. And the net result of this is that over a long period of time, you pile up thousands of different styles for weird documents you've copied and pasted from. And when you look at the document, you're like, why is this font size ever so much smaller on this line than this line? The whole thing looks horrible. So actually, more recent Microsoft Offices have thrown this all away, having written it all at great length and tried to make it work for years. And they go, let's just really aggressively try and use the document styles instead. And so, of course, Markdown has nothing complicated about it at all, really. But we can try and reuse those things as we come in. So it's actually quite a nice fit, and actually can make quite nice-looking documents. So you can see some stuff here. We've selected this, and one of the nice things about IA is typically it's working on a selection. And so we've said, make it more concise. And so, ironically, it's actually made it longer, has it? Well, anyway, so you can press a button here and then push it straight into your document. Obviously, we've had the famous Beaver image generation. I think images are... I was really impressed with the images earlier from the castle images that we have from Elia, which just looked beautiful, didn't they? And you might wonder, how is it that this comes back under the hood? This is all a base 64 encoded PNG, I'm told. It comes over the wire in the latest of high-tech formats. Lots of text going down these wires. So I think we talked a little bit about this, trying to work out what is wrong with my formula, and which can be quite complicated. You can have broken your formula 5 levels deep, and it's somewhere down there. Although, actually, we had very exciting, a new contributor to our project, contribute something that tells you when you break the formula, rather than when you discover you've broken it 100 operations later and you can't undo it anymore, which is kind of useful. So there's a new feature there with a pop-up bar that'll go, you did know when you deleted that column, it broke all of those formulae over there, that sort of thing. Maybe you want to undo that, or would you like to go and see those references? But that aside, it's quite helpful then to be able to come and see some of these things and debug them. And then help inspect it with the function wizard. There's some other nice bits out there just to make it better. So there's a whole lot of other features for calc. Obviously, if you can remember the order of your VLOOKUP parameters or your XLOOKUP parameters, or that your VLOOKUP always needs a false as its last parameter, or is it a true? I forget. Either way, it doesn't work otherwise, is the punchline. Then that's a bit annoying. But if you can remember that you want to sort of do some of this and look these up in that table over there, then we can start to allow you to select ranges and build those formulae from natural language, which is really kind of awesome. Validating formulae, sanity checking data, I think I mentioned some of these. One of the nice things is getting these cell references. So as they come back, we have references, and it's talking about the document. But it's very easy to just click on this and get a focus in that cell. So you can jump between these things, see what's going on. Pretty nice. And yes, filling columns with data and so on, and I don't know. And it's reasonably smart and cunning, which is pretty good. So how does it do it? Well, there's several ways this happens, but one of them is having these sort of eyes into the document. So we can pull data out of the document in various ways to the sidebar, but there are also these APIs here that actually Attila created, I think long ago, the extract transform APIs, that are then being reused, so we can get all sorts of information out, headings, sections, tables, frames, all of those pieces out of the document. And we can, the cat thing's a bit weak, but we'll fix that. And then do all of these operations on it as well. So this is really for more of an MCP front, I guess, but I think It's kind of nice. So yeah, extraction, understanding the document, planning its modifications, and then shoving in some transforms to do that. Now, the question is, do you want to let an AI loose on your document? That's the question. And there's a whole load of approval flows that we've put in here to make this reasonably safer. So the first thing is asking if it's allowed to actually read your document. Can I take this bit out of it? So, you get a prompt of this form. We want to inspect your document. Are you going to allow it or not? And then putting stuff back in, of course, the opposite. I want to change your document. Can I do this? And hopefully providing a human-readable summary. Of course, it's a little bit problematic when it generates its own summary of what it's about to do. So we're going to have an expander there so you can really dig into it. But complicated operations can be a little bit difficult for your average user to understand what they've actually asked for. And so we need to make that clearer. And so you're going to get approve and reject buttons. If you don't like what it's done, you can reject it. And it will do about 5 round trips before it gives up. And that makes you start again. So here's a bit of a picture from that. So GPT-5.4 Mini wants to inspect your document. I want you to summarize it. Well, will you give me access to the document? Please. We should probably put a please here, And so you can approve or reject it. And similarly then, I want 3 slides on climate change. So we didn't start with anything. And now here are 3 slides in outline. Can I apply it? Approve, reject. And again, reject leads you then into that. Hey, what about fixing slide 2 to make it more fun? So that's the sort of UI side of that we talked about on the left-hand side to start with. On the automation side, there's a whole other piece here. So there are 2 HTTP endpoints, and cool MCP is the first one. And this is really a whole lot of JSON being sent down a text stream. So, it sounds complicated, doesn't it, MCP? But the whole web is, well, initially just text being sent, GET in capital letters, and then a URL path to get a file. So much similar to HTTP, I guess, and running over those just a simple socket. So if you've got a really big file, the AI will choose to upload it instead of sending it to you in base 64. I don't know why. Maybe they cared about efficiency for some reason. But this then allows you to update that thing and return a file ID and some kind of access permission so that then the AI can interrogate the file, which is kind of cool. I think we have then a whole load of things it can do. So one of the fun things is that your MCP API is described in human-readable text, and the AI decides how to use that, right? So basically, each interaction, it reads the instructions of what you can do with this kind of document, right? Which is kind of fun. So luckily, and these are a very simple start at the things we can do. But these are all things that you can easily do programmatically anyway, right? So you can convert a document between any of the file types. So you can format, shift, and change documents a whole lot. We can get those bits of document structure out of it to try and better understand the document. Link targets is something to do with navigation. So I think if we're cross-linking documents, we like to provide end users with a little browser so you can select where to link into a document. So if you want to document, for example, into a chart on page 5 of another document, we can create link fragments that will take you straight to that. So it's really cool for creating very rich wiki type things between very rich editable documents. But anyway, not very useful for AI, maybe. And then this batch transformation stuff. So you can send random UNO commands in. Rash tells me that it's very hard to persuade the AI to use UNO commands. It feels scared and doesn't. Even if you aggressively encourage it, maybe they're too abstract or something yet. And then here's the upload, repair upload. So I mentioned this pushing the file instead of sending it in base 64, and it discovers that. So there's a couple of this guys. This is a small one. It sends thing. Otherwise, it's doing this sort of handshake to get a secure access to the file. Gets shoved into cool WSD. There's a security here of a bearer token. So there's a shared secret to allow it to get access. Obviously, we turn this all off as well by default. So like if you don't want it, you don't get any of it, just to reiterate that. And then the document is created. And so since this is an AI remote controlling our software, it's wise to put that, each document is in a separate jail. So there's a custom container for every document you use anyway in Collabora Online. But what we don't want is some kind of jailbreak escape of some madness on your server, right? So all of those wonderful security things that I've talked about before, the huge security onion we apply, is really, really important if you have an AI remote controlling your document flow. What else can I say? Yeah, so that's all then created and it's torn down at the end of this as well. Now, if you're a deeply paranoid sort of person, even more paranoid, what you can do is you can split out your MCP work into its own, buried, easy to destroy data center under the ground. And so your proxy can basically handle all the traffic and push it to dedicated machines that have nothing else on them except the document the AI already sent you. And so then hopefully life is relatively safe. And then what comes out of these JSON responses, and just getting a simple replies out of that. So how do we configure this? Well, lots of ways. So if the user is allowed, if it has been enabled by the admin on the server, then we can show this UI that allows you to select which of the common ones or a custom one, so for a local URL, for example, and put your API key in, and it will then query the end server, give you a list of models, and you can choose the super expensive one that's very slow, or the super cheap one that's also very slow, because everyone's using them, But anyway, there you go. So you can select that and save this, and it'll be saved in your view settings and so on. Yeah, lots of things work. And I should finish shortly, so I shall do that, which is convenient because I'm nearly at the end. Ha, fantastic. Yes, so the last thing is configuration. I can see out there all these eager integrators that want AI pixie dust to boost their stock price to, the stratosphere, So how do we integrate this? Well, there's a whole choice, as with everything. So the first thing is that if we've enabled it, the user can do it, as I just showed you. But separately, if you wanted to use a different model for every user, or a different model arguably for each person editing the same document, then you can send a WAPI property back called, in this user private info magic. Not a very beautiful way of doing it, but it'll work, just like the Zotero integration. And that will then allow you to connect to the AI. You can configure it for your whole system, so you can have a server-wide system. Obviously, if you're privacy conscious, you probably do that, lock it down, have it to your on-premise server, and just once again, it's off by default. So that, as they say, is that. Thank you very much.